So, now I'm going to read the second chapter of Twilight Chronicles Dawn, which will eventually be retitled Pandemonia Chronicles Dawn. It's the first book of a three-part series. The next two books will be Eve and then Night. I like the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun sort of motif, and I want that to be part of the books. So here is the second chapter, Escape. Wake up, demon! Gestalt opened his eyes and realized his feet were dragging behind him. Two knights were stretching him by his arms, painfully pushing his body forward. "Kneel! Wake up and kneel!" said the voice again. Gestalt didn't know what was happening, but he smelled something wonderful. He raised his head and saw a fair-skinned woman sitting on a golden throne surrounded by spear-wielding knights. Shining silver curtains hung from every wall, and the cold ceiling before him glowed like gold. It probably was gold, and this probably was some kind of temple, Gestalt thought. The woman before Gestalt was gorgeous, and he thought she seemed to be at least in her late 20s. Her hair curled into perfect golden spirals that dangled past her shoulders, and her large round breasts were nearly visible through her white silk robes. Her eyes were emerald green, and her lips were full and red. Sparkles of golden dust caked every inch of her exposed skin. The beautiful woman radiated a kind of light that both memorized and terrified Gestalt at once. "Kneel before the goddess Deus!" The knight kicked Gestalt's back hard with his boot, causing Gestalt to fall face first upon the golden tiled ground. "Genelion, this is the demon you caught in Narche?" asked Deus. "Yes, my goddess," replied Genelion, whose voice Gestalt now recognized. Genelion was the knight from the fair. "The villagers saw him appear out of nowhere. Only magic could do that. He is either a demon or he is aligned with them." The goddess looked at Gestalt, smiling and batting her eyelashes seductively. "Tell me, child," said Deus in a soft voice, "what is your name?" Gestalt thought about whether he should say who he is, then decided it probably would be best to cooperate. Maybe they would let him go if he answered their questions. "My name is Gestalt. What do you want with me?" "What kind of magic do you use?" asked Deus. "I didn't use any magic," said Gestalt. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. Whatever game you're playing, I'm not in it. I'm just at the fair to look around." "He lies," said Genelion. "He dares to lie to you, my goddess. Let me strike him down now before you and do you justice." "Hold on," said Deus. "I am not done with him yet. I want to know what magic he has. It may be a type that I do not yet have." Deus rose from her throne and walked toward Gestalt. He looked up at her as she gently put her soft hands around his cheeks and carefully lifted his head from the ground. Gestalt's eyes met with the goddess's, and they stared deeply at one another. Deus's eyes twinkled with the golden light. "Give me your magic," whispered Deus, and as she spoke, Gestalt focused on her lips. "Kiss me and give me everything you have." Gestalt closed his eyes and was going to let her kiss him. The thought was pleasant. In fact, the thought seemed great. "No." Gestalt heard a voice from somewhere deep within him. "Don't let her touch you!" Gestalt jerked his head out of the goddess's hands. The goddess's eyes grew wide with anger. "I do recognize that livery collar around your neck." Deus looked to her knights. "Take the medallion of it away from him. We can't let him bond with it." Genelion grabbed the medallion, but when he touched it, the medallion glowed an ominous red mist. The knight screamed in pain and jerked his hand back. "Lock him up," said Deus. "Lock him up and let him rot until he gives me his magic." "I have to get out of here," thought Gestalt. "I've got to run." But before he could, he felt a blow to the back of his head. Once again, his vision blurred as he fell into shadows and silence. "Gestalt, Gestalt." A familiar and masculine voice called to him as he drifted in some dark, cold place. "Let me out, boy," said the voice. "Let me have my revenge on this world." Although the words were vicious, the gentleness of the voice led Gestalt to believe the person was sad and desperate, and was very faint. "Let's burn this world to the ground." Suddenly, the voices of two more men pierced through the darkness, and sent a chill up Gestalt's spine. Just toss him Just toss him in with that there other demon. Not like he'd bloody escape through Mithril boss. True dat. Droplets of murky water splattered onto Gestalt's face, and he awoke to find himself in the dark dreariness of a dungeon, complete with lawn prison bars, wall-mounted shackles, and a cold stone floor. As Gestalt used his hands to push himself back to his feet, the backside of his head throbbed. Reaching past his left ear, a painful wetness spread between his fingers. I'm bleeding? Gestalt was amazed. He recalled the events that had brought him to this unfamiliar place. As best he could remember, first he had bought the medallion, then an angry mob suddenly attacked him. Now he was locked up in what appeared to be a mock yet highly detailed prison set. Wait, did they even have a prison set at this fair? There's something really screwy going on here. Gestalt pressed his face against the cold metal bars that kept him in his pen. He tried to see if there was anyone nearby. Maybe they could let him out, or at least give him some answers. Gestalt heard the echo of footsteps approaching. Hey, someone there? Asked Gestalt. Please let me out of here. There's been some kind of mistake. Ain't be no mistake, demon, replied the husky, wild-looking man that approached his cell. An odd odor was about him, as if the man had been rolling around in roadkill, and Gestalt deduced that the man hadn't bathed in days. Hey, come on, dude, stop using that fake accent. Gestalt held his nostrils closed with his hands. Nobody talks like that anymore, so quit playing around. There be only two languages in all this world, and that be the demon's tongue and English. You mean English, corrected Gestalt. No, English! The foul-smelling guard menacingly shook his raised right fist at Gestalt. I says what I means, demon! It's no use, kid. He's probably from the swamps of the Amabala region, and they all have a weird accent there. Spoke an unfamiliar voice from behind Gestalt. Gestalt sharply turned around in his cell, looking for where the voice had came from. What? Is someone else in here? Gestalt searched the cell, but to his surprise he found no one. Gestalt then noticed, sitting in the corner of his cell against a stone wall, was a small teddy bear. Now, this wasn't just a typical teddy bear. This particular bear was stitched from different types of fabrics, at least velvet, flannel, and satin, and with at least 3 different colors, including blue, gray, and orange. He was a patchwork bear if Gestalt had ever seen one. In addition to his abnormal construction, someone had tied a tattered blue handkerchief around his neck like a little cape. Gestalt noticed that resting on top of the plush bear's little head was a short and well-worn black top hat with a band made of weathered white fabric. Also of peculiar interest, little white ribbons with some odd sort of letters written upon them were bound around the bear's little arms and legs. Gestalt thought they looked sort of like the Viking runes he once saw on a school field trip to the city museum, but he couldn't say for sure. When the smelly guard left the area to continue his patrol of the dungeon floor, Gestalt slowly walked toward the bear to examine it. Though he didn't know what he would find, he was sure the voice had come from this direction. He wondered if someone was playing some kind of trick on him. Maybe there was some kind of speaker installed in the wall or something. Howdy! Said the plush bear in a cheerful tone that nonetheless startled Gestalt so badly he jumped back several inches in a panic. There was no mistake this time. The bear turned its head up to Gestalt, and his black button eyes somehow even blinked. Now, I know I've been in here a while, buddy, said the bear, but I'm pretty sure when someone says howdy to you, you're supposed to say howdy back. Gestalt stumbled backwards in a panic until his backside met the cold prison bars that held him captive. A talking teddy bear, said Gestalt. Now I know this has to be a dream. I am not a teddy bear, said the bear. I'm just sort of in an embarrassing situation. Perplexed by the thought of a talking teddy bear that told corny jokes, Gestalt's only reaction was to raise his eyebrows in disbelief and drop his jaw in startled silence. Noticing this, the bear frowned with disappointment and he turned away from Gestalt. Oh, well, I thought it was funny, said the bear. Just my luck, I suppose. Naturally, I'd be locked up with a human boy that has no sense of humor. If this little adventure was a dream, then Gestalt figured there was nothing to worry about. Regardless of how cynical he could be, he'd never dreamed that a comical teddy bear could kill him. Using this logic, Gestalt knelt down beside his fellow captive to speak to him. So, you know I'm a human then? Asked Gestalt. Of course I do, said the bear. I'd know a human anywhere. Hell, they've had me captured here for, well, I'm not really sure how long, but it's been a really long time, and that's what really matters. In a way, the bear was correct. However long he had been held captive, Gestalt believed it had been a very long time, judging by the thick blanket of dust that covered his furry little body. "Anyway," said the bear, "before I was locked up in here, I had served a human master for when he was a young'un, so I surely know what a human boy looks like and what he doesn't. And you certainly look like a human boy, that I can be certain of." To Gestalt, this was fantastic news. "Good! When the guard comes back, you can tell him I'm a human." "And what good could that possibly do?" said the bear, "as if he would believe anything I say. I'm an elemental spirit, you know. To that bloke, I'm a demon all the same." "A demon?" Gestalt remembered that he had been accused of being one as well. "Hey, that's what they called me too." "Yes, but I am most certainly not a demon," said the bear. "I am an elemental, a sylph, as a matter of fact, you idiot paladins!" The bear's outburst was a bit confusing to Gestalt, as he didn't really know that there was a difference between an elemental and a demon. What Gestalt did know was that it was quite frustrating to be accused of being something he wasn't, and punished for it nonetheless. "I should not be compared to a demon," said the bear. "Not that there's anything particularly wrong with being a demon, mind you. It's just that we're not the same thing." "If I might ask," said Gestalt, "what is the difference between an elemental and a demon?" "I'll tell you." The bear outstretched his bandaged paws to Gestalt and grinned. "If you would be so kind as to free me from these troubling ribbons." Gestalt pulled loose the ribbons to free his fellow captive, and the bear rocked himself back and forth upon the ground. The movement caused the dust bunnies to free themselves from the bear's fur. "Well, we elementals are part of nature and a manifestation of magic." The bear shook more dust off himself. "A demon is a manifestation of magic too, but they come from the netherworld, and they use different magic. It would be like comparing raindrops to a toad. We are very different things, and exist for very different reasons. Got it?" "I think so." Gestalt recalled that this comparison paralleled the distinct classes of mythological beings from his favorite video game. It's kind of like how it is in Forever Fantastico. "Forever Fantastico?" said the bear. "Is that the land where you come from or something?" Gestalt shook his head. "No, it's just a game I play where I come from. You go on quests to fight against dragons and monsters to save princesses and stuff." Hopping himself onto his feet, the bear stretched his arms up into the air and swung his hips around. At first Gestalt thought he was dancing a little jig, but he was probably just trying to rid himself of more dust. "How wonderful! Then you're a warrior, I presume?" "Not exactly." Gestalt grinned nervously. "I think you're misunderstanding. It's just a game." "A game, a quest, whatever you wish it," said the bear. "I am just glad that someone like you is here. You can help me escape from this wretched place." "Escape?" said Gestalt. "Can we actually do that?" The bear shrugged his little shoulders. "Well, you're the expert, Mr. Dragon Slayer. You tell me." Gestalt looked at the cell bars and then looked to the bear. Seeing as how the bars were spaced so that Gestalt could conceivably fit his legs and arms through, he thought it was likely that his small companion could squeeze his body through the gaps between the bars. "Maybe you can sneak through the bars and find a key or something." "Won't work," the bear replied almost immediately, as if he had already considered that same plan a very long time ago. "Those bars are made of mithril. If I get close to them, they'll sap my magical powers, and that's a rather unpleasant sort of feeling, to say the least." "Mithril?" Gestalt remembered that mithril was an often used name for a special silver-like metal found in a lot of RPG games. "You mean like dwarven mithril?" "Dwarven mithril? What the hell is that? The mithril that covers our cell is a metal forged by human hands to harm magical creatures. I don't think dwarves can even touch this stuff, considering that dwarves are earth elementals and all." This is not like Forever Fantastico at all, thought Gestalt. Up until this point, Gestalt thought that he might just be having this strange dream because of his obsession with video games. But the rules governing this world were way different than any role-playing game he'd ever played. Anyway, if we were to become cohorts, we should properly introduce ourselves. The bear outstretched his little right paw up at Gestalt. "I am Jafar of Ashdown Forest. I'm at your service, friend." My name is Gestalt Chernobug of, Earth." Gestalt took hold of Jafar's paw in friendship. "Gestalt Chernobug, eh?" said the bear. "Am I pronouncing it right?" "Yep, you got it right. I'm surprised. Most people I've met can't get it right the first time." Gestalt heard footsteps coming from down the hallway. This time, there seemed to be more than one person approaching the dungeon. "Quickly, lay down and be still." Jafar's body fell sharply to the ground. "Otherwise they will pay too much attention and notice I'm untied." Gestalt spread himself neatly across the ground, just as the three men came into view. Two of the men helped the third man stumble down the hallway, guiding him to a nearby cell. Gestalt watched his breathing, as to not draw unnecessary attention to himself, and he hid himself in the darkness of his cell. "Hey, there, unicorn demon!" spoke one of the guards away from Gestalt's view. "This here guy gotten himself poisoned by drinking too much lager. Boss says you're to purge the ills out of this here body. Do it!" "Like, I have a choice," replied a soft feminine voice from the nearby cell. Shortly after, a radiant white light penetrated the darkness of the dank dungeon, and though his body was pressed firmly against the ground, even a few beams of that precious light managed to touch Gestalt's face. "It's so warm and soothing," thought Gestalt, and for a moment he felt like he was remembering something nice that he'd forgotten from a long time ago, but he couldn't quite place what it was that he had forgotten. "Wish granted," said the feminine voice. The light withered away, allowing a blanket of darkness to cover the room again. When the soldiers walked past his cell again, Gestalt noticed that the man who had been barely able to stand was now walking by himself ahead of the two other soldiers, though he still seemed to be dragging his feet just a little bit. However, it was a remarkable change in his health. When the footsteps of the soldiers drifted away into the distance of the hall, Gestalt turned to Jafar. "What was that light?" asked Gestalt. "Oh, that was a wish from the unicorn over there." Jafar stood up on his feet, indicating that he felt the guards were too far away to hear or notice him. "She's also a captive. We elementals are sort of collectible." "She gave them a wish? Why? Isn't she a prisoner?" "Unicorns are a special kind of elemental, a light elemental, really sacred and very rare. They have to give humans wishes under certain conditions. One of these conditions is if they are held prisoner. Sort of an odd rule system if you ask me, but then again their chief is sort of strange, has a disturbing obsession with rainbows. Anyway, unicorns cannot refuse to grant a wish. They'll drop dead on the spot." Gestalt's first reaction was to say, "A unicorn that grants wishes? This place is really like an RPG," but this brought about the question of, where exactly am I? If this was a dream inspired by the video games he plays, then he must also be in some location that existed in one of them. There was only one way to find out for sure. Where exactly am I anyway?" said Gestalt. "I don't really recognize this place at all." "That's not surprising," replied Jafar. "Most people have never seen the dungeons of Hadrian Castle before." "Hadrian Castle?" remarked Gestalt. "That name's awfully familiar." "It certainly ought to be familiar to you," said the bear as he crossed his little arms. "Hadrian Castle sits near the borders of the Gluskov Empire and Pandemonia. Of course you must know all about the country of Twilight. Who doesn't these days? Anyway, the city of Narshe is a few miles east of here. I imagine you've heard of Narshe at least, considering that's where the guards who dumped you off said you were caught. Or so I ever heard." Narshe? Gluskov Empire? Country of Twilight? Gestalt couldn't recall where he had heard these names before. They seemed strangely nostalgic. It's possible they could be from some video game he once played, but at the moment he couldn't pin down just one. Which one? "Hey!" Jafar stared at Gestalt's chest and walked closer to him so that he could get a better look. "That's a fancy medallion you got there." Gestalt looked down his chest to see that the silver medallion he had purchased at the Renaissance Fair was still dangling from his neck. "Oh, this?" Gestalt grasped it with his right hand to examine it better. "Yeah, I suppose it's kind of cool." "You know," said Jafar, "it looks just a wee bit familiar to me, though I can't quite place where I've seen it before." "Well, I got this from where I'm from, so it's not likely," said Gestalt. After all, even if this was a dream, and he was still from the real world, and things in his dream should not know of what happens outside of them. "Oh, but it is likely." Jafar stretched his little paws wide. "Why, when my master was alive, we traveled the whole world together. When you do something like that, you're bound to just see everything there is to see." Gestalt raised his eyebrow. "When your master was alive?" "Oh yes, my last master died a while ago. He was a human, you know. All my masters were. Been difficult finding a new one, though. The times have somewhat changed and magical folk just aren't viewed very kindly in these lands anymore." "I'm sorry." "Oh, it's all right." Jafar shrugged his shoulders. "When you live as long as I have, you get used to human masters coming and going." "Doesn't it make you sad, though?" asked Gestalt. "I mean, to lose so many people in your life?" "Of course I am saddened by the loss of a good master," said Jafar. "But loss is a part of life, just like new friends are, like you and me. Though I can't say for sure how long you'll be around either, since after all, you're kind of in a worse situation than I am." "Worse situation?" Gestalt was getting nervous. "What do you mean?" "Well," said Jafar, "they don't exactly feed us in here. It's not a problem for me, but since you're a human, you might starve to death if you remain here." "Starve to death?" Gestalt's mind panicked and his thoughts filled with worries. No way! This is a dream! A dream! I can't actually die in a dream! Can I? The little bear reached into his top hat and produced a set of playing cards. Well, before you do starve to death, said Jafar, fancy a game of blackjack to pass the time, perhaps? Gestalt looked at the bear with a nervous smile. Blackjack? Said Gestalt. Is that really what we should be doing right now? Jafar grinned and put the cards back into his hat. Oh, so you mean you don't want to die? You hesitated for a moment, so thought you might want to just accept fate. No, of course not. Gestalt wiped the sweat from his thick, unruly brow. Who would ever want to die here? Then let's resist fate and escape, said Jafar. I have a brilliant plan. Forge a pact with me. Then you might be able to get us both out of here. A pact? Asked Gestalt. Lucky for us those goons can't tell the difference between humans and demons, said Jafar. If you'd actually been a demon, then I couldn't share my power with you. See, I can't use my spells without a human master. You might say it's one of the drawbacks to this form. Drawbacks? Asked Gestalt. This stuffed toy isn't my real body, said Jafar. I was imprisoned in it a really long time ago. You could say this is how elementals serve sentences for crimes. We have to live like this until we serve out that sentence, and in the meantime spread goodwill and fortune in the human world by forging pacts with humans, allowing them to use our magic as magicians. You're a criminal? Asked Gestalt. Is that why you're in this cell? Sort of. But that was a long time ago, and that isn't why the Paladins locked me up. I came into Narshe looking for a new master, and people started freaking out with demon this and that, and then when I tried to explain things, some stupid Paladin grabbed me. Gestalt thought carefully about everything Jafar said, mainly the bit about a teddy bear casting spells. And to make it worse, said Jafar, even if I could use spells, the mithril bars would just deflect my magic away if I tried to blast through. So neither of us can get out by ourselves. You, however, can stick your arm through the bars to the outside of the cell. Then you can free us by using my magical spells. Can I really do that? Gestalt held his doubts about the plan. It seemed very impossible, even for a dream. Use magical spells, I mean. Of course you can, said Jafar. I'll teach you how, so don't fret. Magic is actually rather simple. Incantations are really just a kind of password for accessing a predefined effect, and you'll channel the spell through me anyway. I'll do most of the work. Okay, replied Gestalt. If his dream was going to have magic, he might as well play along. What do I have to do? Just stretch your arm over here, and I'll give you my mark. Jafar motioned Gestalt to lay his hand in front of him. Gestalt lowered himself to the ground, and Jafar pressed his right paw on the back of Gestalt's left hand. Almost instantly, an aura of blue light flashed from Gestalt's hand. Jafar pulled back his paw to expose what he had done, and Gestalt's head fell back in amazement, for a blue lightning bolt design was imprinted onto the back of his hand. Gestalt thought this was the coolest way of applying a tattoo he had ever seen. All done, said Jafar. He seemed rather satisfied with his work. Is that all there is to it? Is that all there is to it? Asked Gestalt. Admittedly, he was a little disbelieving it could be that simple. After all, in most all fantasy tales he had ever read, entering a pact of the spirit usually consists of shrouding in a black cloak while chanting, praying, and giving offerings to deities, or something elaborately grand and complex. Given this, Gestalt thought becoming a wizard should be more complicated than just having his arm magically cattle branded by a teddy bear. I mean, don't I need to take a sacred oath or perform some special ritual? Oh, heavens no. Those theatrics are all quite unnecessary, said Jafar. Sure, some elementals like to spruce it up a bit. I won't say any names, of course, but you'll find them a little more practical than that. Jafar pointed his right paw behind Gestalt, which encouraged Gestalt to turn around to see what the little bear was gesturing at. See that lever over there on the wall? It controls the cell doors. If you use my levitation spell on it, you should be able to raise the lever and let us free. Gestalt looked and, sure enough, saw a metal handle on the wall opposite of their cell. It seemed to be attached to some kind of pulley system utilizing chains. Is that what you mean? Gestalt pointed to the device. Yes, that's the one, said Jafar. Just stick your arm out of the cell, point at it, and say the magical word for my levitation spell, which is Vantage. Make sure you focus all of your attention on that lever, otherwise you might levitate something else and cause a ruckus. Also, the magical word is a command, so speak it loud and clear. Following the instructions the Patchwork Bearer had given, Gestalt thrust his arm through the mithril bars and pointed his index finger at the metal lever across from him. After staring at the lever for several seconds to make sure he was focused on it, Gestalt then spoke the word that was supposed to translate into magic. Vantage! Gestalt commanded, his eyes directed firmly on the lever. When the last bit of the word left his lips, 2 rings of blue light materialized from his fingertips. The first ring was large, bearing strange blue lightning. The first ring was large, bearing strange blue writing on it, and encircled the other smaller ring. The small ring did not move, but it held inside of it a much larger thunderbolt-like rune that greatly resembled the pack mark Jafar had just left on his arm. If Gestalt hadn't known any better, he would have thought the two rings were some kind of electrical neon sign, like the kind they used to see in the windows of video arcades and bars. A blue aura surrounded the lever Gestalt pointed to, and it flipped upward, releasing the tension on the chains. The pulley rolled and the prison bars lifted. Gestalt sharply withdrew his arm to prevent it from being caught in the gates that flew upward into the ceiling. Unusual, but excellent. Most impressive, said Jafar. You got it in the first go. You must be a natural-born wizard. A genius, really. Gestalt could barely believe what had just happened. But because it did indeed happen, he was forced to acknowledge that he was now capable of using magic. Well, he rationalized at least in his dream he could. Stepping out of the damp cell, Gestalt looked down the dimly lit hallway to make sure no one had heard the gates open, and when the coast seemed clear, he stepped onto the stone floor of the hall. Jafar followed Gestalt out of the cell, and once he was away from the metal bars, the little bear swiftly rose up into the air, hovering like a helium balloon. Oh, that is so much better! Jafar performed a series of floating cartwheels around Gestalt. It's been so long since I've stretched out my magical muscles. Watching Jafar play, Gestalt thought that while it was peculiar to meet a talking teddy bear that can make people into wizards, it was even stranger to see one who could do that and float through the air. Never in his life had Gestalt thought such a thing was possible, yet now he was being confronted with such a reality. It started to dawn on Gestalt that, just maybe, he wasn't dreaming any of this at all. There was a chance that all of this was actually happening. After all, it's rather unusual for him to have a throbbing headache inside a dream. Well, I suppose it's time for us to get going then. Jafar looked around. I believe the easiest route for escape is by climbing the stairwell up to the rooftop. From there, we should be able to easily escape with another levitation spell. Gestalt, however, was not entirely paying attention to his new little friend. He remembered the mysterious warm light he had felt before, and was going to see for himself if a unicorn truly had made it appear. Gestalt peered into the next cell expecting to see a large white horse, but instead found what seemed to be a human girl about his age, sitting neatly on a little wooden stool. When he looked at her elegant blue dress and laced bonnet, she looked right back at him with a cute button nose and two large hazel eyes. And it was then that Gestalt noticed a straight, spiraled white horn extending out from the blonde hairline of her forehead. Are you really a unicorn? Gestalt studied the maiden and noticed her blonde hair dangled down to her waist. I'd always thought that unicorns were, sort of like horses. My original form is different, replied the girl in a soft yet peculiarly stern voice. But I am totally not a horse. I just prefer this form, that's all. Gestalt was a little embarrassed. Sorry, I didn't mean to insult you or anything. The unicorn maiden smiled, and her mood took a 180-degree turn. Oh, it's okay. Say, are you planning to escape from here? It'd be really rad if you take me along. When Gestalt heard the girl speak, he swore that her dialect resembled that of a valley girl, which was highly improbable even if he was actually awake right now. How could a unicorn in another world talk the same way as a peppy teenage girl from his world? Gestalt felt certain that this whole experience had to be a very weird dream. There were too many subtle irregularities here for him to have actually entered a new world, right? This adventure was all just in his head, wasn't it? Are you gonna just stare at me or what? The maiden crossed her arms and looked at Gestalt with great anticipation, as if she had already decided that he was going to free her. I know I'm really cute. I know I'm really, really cute. And you probably can't help it, but I'm getting bored! You use Val speak? Asked Gestalt, like a valley girl in the movies. The girl's pretty face morphed into a sneer, and then she laughed. Well, duh! I'm from the Valley of the Unicorns. Hello? The girl's mood shifted again. Gestalt could tell her facial expressions dramatically shifted. Gestalt could tell because her facial expressions dramatically shifted. She blinked her eyes twice, crinkled her nose, and asked innocently, but what are the movies? I've never heard of that place before. Hey, we gotta go! Jafar floated over to Gestalt's shoulder and sat down on it. The guards will be back soon, and we don't want them to know we were out of our cell until after we have escaped. Well, we can't just leave her here. Gestalt looked at the unicorn maid. She seemed like she'd be sort of annoying to travel with, but he didn't think it'd be right to leave her alone in such a dreary place. Can we help her out? Fine. Jafar flew over to a lever across from her cell and tried to pull it up, but he struggled to do so. Bloody hell, this thing is heavy! I'll do it. Gestalt turned to the lever and pushed it up rather easily, releasing the gate's lock so that it was now opened. Thanks a bunch! The girl smiled warmly at him, still seated neatly on her stool. Her vocal tone was much more pleasant now that she knew she was freed. I am Zarya Jasper. Now, give me your wish list. You can have 2 small wishes or 1 big wish. Wish list. Gestalt didn't know what wishes had to do with anything right now. Gestalt had a lot of things he'd always wished he had, mostly video games, but at this moment he didn't have time to talk about that sort of thing. This could have been due to the fact he was in the middle of a prison escape in a strange world and naturally under a lot of pressure to not get caught. At this very second, the only thing Gestalt really wanted was to get far, far away from this dungeon. Just come with me, okay? Gestalt extended his hand out to the girl to help her stand up. It seemed the proper thing to do. However, Zarya would not take it. I won't do it! Not until you make your wish. It's the rules, said Zarya. Well, fine then. Gestalt was becoming more nervous the longer they remained in the dungeon. I wish you would take my hand and come with me. Zarya's demeanor changed from stubbornness to shock. She stared at Gestalt's outstretched hand like there was something dreadful about it, and Gestalt could see her lips trembling. Take your hand and walk with you? That's your wish? Yeah, sure, said Gestalt roughly, still holding out his hand to her. He really wanted to get out of the place where the guards caught him. That's my wish, I guess. The Yen Maiden looked up to him with soft, brown... The Yen Maiden looked up to him with her soft, big brown eyes. Zarya slowly took hold of his hand and stood up from her stool, her long blonde hair flowing like angel wings around her, as if levitated by some invisible force. A white light suddenly emanated from Zarya's spiraled horn. As the room became filled with her soft light, Gestalt felt that something deep inside him was changing, just a little bit, and that the touch of the Unicorn Maiden's hand was pouring a comforting warmth into his very soul. His headache was gone. Wish granted! Zarya smiled brightly and looked into Gestalt's eyes. I will be your bride! What? Gestalt was beyond confused. Jafar sank his head down to his stomach and let loose an aggravated sigh. Oh boy, this is just what we need right now. If a human frees a unicorn or saves her life, you get to make a wish and anything you wish for will come true. Jafar bopped Gestalt on the head gently with his furry paw and explained that by wishing for a unicorn to take his hand, he had made a proposal of marriage to her. And when a human who has saved her life makes a wish like that, a unicorn cannot refuse it. Jafar also added that, not that it mattered anymore, Gestalt could pretty much have asked for anything he wanted. Wealth, power, fame, or perhaps to teleport them outside of the castle into safety. But instead, you asked to marry her. Jafar sighed heavily. Well, congratulations, I suppose. If we live long enough, I'll bake you a cake. Oh, I'm like so happy! Zarya gave Gestalt a crushing hug. I have wanted to get married for like ever! With a brightly smiling Zarya holding him tightly in her arms, Gestalt's eyes grew to twice their normal size, and his face turned completely red. If any guards had been within earshot, they might have heard Gestalt's voice echoing through the halls. But I'm too young to get married! Luckily for him, the guards must have been distracted with more pressing matters than the escape of a confused human boy, a peppy unicorn maiden, and a flying teddy bear with a top hat. That is the end of Chapter 2.